So we got to ask you about like research that you've been a part of.
Uh-huh.
We just wanted, because in our class right now it's for the master's research, and this is like we have to interview someone that's actually done research before.
Okay.
Um, Francisco and I are doing like collecting research on students with ASD that have like what are good strategies to teach them like emotional and social skills.
Right.
But it doesn't matter. We just need like input from a researcher and like their involvement. We have a couple questions. So
Okay.
if you want to say, like, tell us a little about yourself and your background in your research, or just you as a person.
So I work at Portland State University. Um, I'm a part-time cohort leader presently. Uh, I teach classes that you guys have been, well, not, I don't think I've ever taught Francisco.
You haven't.
I haven't. Yeah, I don't get you until math. Yeah, so basically, the research I do is around the kind of multi-tiered systems of support. So I do a lot of kind of school-wide behavior stuff as well as academic supports. So think of something like RTI or something, particularly in reading. Um, it's kind of what I do. Before doing this stuff, I was a teacher for about 7 years. I've worked in alternative high schools supporting, let's just say, students that were deficient in credits and maybe liked a couple of drugs and stab people. Had all those. At one point, I like to say that I had taught like I don't know what the number is now. I think it was like 5 murderers. That
Oh,
number's probably
wow.
higher now. So that was how I started my career. Then I got into special education. And so, in terms of research, I'm all about applied research. I don't. It's not that I don't care about theoretical research, but I want to see whatever I talk about and whatever I come up with actually work with real people. And so, do a lot of single case stuff. I also have some expertise in kind of group design methods of research and statistical analysis.
Sweet. Um, can you tell us a brief overview of a study that you were involved in?
Okay, so I can talk about. I'll talk about this one. I should tell you about Sheldon's and expose him a little bit. I won't do that. So I was a part of one study that looked at a curriculum for high school students that basically created a class, a secondary support class for students that were struggling with moderate to minor problem behaviors and also struggling with, academics in terms of
Yeah.
assignment completion and whatnot. And so as part of that study, a class was created. The lead person on the study went in there and actually supported training of the teachers. And my job was actually as a data collector. So this was, I think, probably my first study where I got to collect data on something other than like my master's thesis. And so I'd go in and I'd do some direct observation data. So I'd have to go into classrooms and actually watch kids and use this protocol. And then what was born from that was essentially this curriculum that kind of got refined. And then later when I did my own dissertation, I did a follow-up study looking at one very particular part that basically tried to teach students what I call student-guided supports. But it was essentially a small set of teacher pleaser behaviors to increase the likelihood that they got what they needed from their teachers, right? So it's like, how do you get feedback from teachers?
Yeah.
How do you show interest and show whatever? And so I both those research projects use single case design. So multiple baseline across participants. So we had a number of people and we looked at participants in different settings in some cases, sometimes that same participant at different times of the day. And a lot of it was based on direct observation as opposed to like survey or, some other methods of research.
Sweet.
Chris, when you're doing your this research, are you working with a lot of other people?
Yeah, so most of the research I do has to have at very least a classroom teacher that I have to collaborate with, but a lot of times you collaborate with the whole school, and so there's going to be at least one member of administration and maybe a group of teachers that you work with in order for you to get them trained on what you want them to do, and also for you to figure out what they need, because the best way to work in applied settings is to provide a service in addition to collecting your own data. And so I work with a number of teachers and at least one administrator for every kind of research project I do.
And you were saying that you worked with in this study that it was minor to moderate behavior. Is it ever an issue and that's how you feel the behavior is, where other people are saying these are huge issues?
Well, that happens sometimes. I have a special education background, and I've worked alternative ed, and I've worked in a locked mental health facility. So what people consider as severe, I don't typically. And so a lot of times it's about the perception becomes reality. And so for people that are thinking that, no, this is really a disruptive behavior, it doesn't matter whether it is or not, that person, especially if it's a teacher, will treat that student as such, right? So as soon as that student makes a peep, it's like, oh, he's doing that again. And a lot of times that results in the student being kicked out of the class. So I try to work on really tying teacher perception to the reality. So it's like, well, here's what we collected in terms of the data on the student's behavior, and this is what like the other kids are doing. And sometimes you find that the kid that's being targeted as kind of the hellion is not that different from the other kids in the classroom. And so once you're able to show that to a teacher and work with some strategies that actually make them feel better about teacher, or not about teacher, but about the student's performance, they tend to see the student as being less of a problem than they once were.
Do you think there's any key limitations of the study that you were a part of?
Oh, there's always limitations, because ultimately, anytime you're doing single case, who is that representative of? Right. Other than the people that were in the research study. And so those limitations around kind of the external validity or generalizability of the study are always there. Other things is we would love to have more observations of students to actually see what they do for longer increments of time, but that's not really feasible given kind of people's time and how long you can sit in a classroom and effectively record data on people's behavior. Other things were, there's a lot of other stuff that going on during the studies, so life still goes on. So kids are maybe getting additional support within the other classrooms that we're not aware of. And so a lot of things could have resulted in the behavior changes that we eventually saw across the two studies. We want to believe it's what we did, but, we couldn't say that with 100% certainty.
What do you think were the most important implications of your practice, of your research?
Honestly, that real kids benefited from it. And so, again, for me, it's all about real kids getting better in their actual environments, right? I don't do a lot of stuff in analog settings. I do stuff about kids in real schools. And so while the research is helpful for me, and the research has allowed me to basically meet some goals and write a little bit in terms of the results, it actually resulted in students performing better in schools and arming them with tools so that they could be successful once I left. And so I think that's probably the most important implications of basically any of the research that I've done.
Yeah. Well, because it's like all behavior, like you're a behavior guy, like that's what you look out for.
Well, some of it, but there's also, academic components. So how do you actually get some support when you need help academically? Yeah. And so the thing that I did for my dissertation was a lot about how do you get what you need from teachers, right? Because that becomes difficult, especially if you've been labeled as, the kid that either doesn't perform well or doesn't care.
Yeah, problem kid.
Yeah, pretty much.
Anything else you'd like to share with us?
What else are you looking for?
Yeah, I think we covered it. Francisco, do you have anything?
I'll ask another question. We probably have about 3 more minutes here. But Chris, how do you stay up to date on this topic? We're talking about behavior mostly here, and right. Do you feel that it's constantly changing, or are you kind of like, hey, we're preaching PBS here, we're just going to keep doing that?
So it's a little bit of both. So the principles stay the same, the applications change. And so the reading, right, reading new journal articles, but also talking to professionals in the field about how are they tackling these issues that they're coming across. And so the great thing about behavior and a lot of other things is that it's based upon theory, and the theory doesn't change too often. But again, it's how do you apply that theory to this school over here in this urban neighborhood, or how do you apply it to rural settings? And so when I go to conferences or when I have some of my professional connections in terms of my colleagues, I always ask about their experiences and implementation. And so, how do I stay abreast of the new stuff? I read a bit. I keep my head out on a swivel for things that come across my desk that are related, maybe are done by different people, but are related to the kind of things that I think about, and I'll read those. But also make sure I have rich conversations with my colleagues and other people that I work with that are in schools.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
I think that's a great ending note for me. Anything else? I think we're good.
I think we've covered a lot.
That's it. All right. Short and sweet.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Absolutely. Do well on the class.
Thanks.
Tell Sam he owes me one.